Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode from Your Own Pathway Leadership and Mental Wellbeing. For those who don't know me, my name is Payevu. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and trauma informed leadership consultant. And I help leaders realign to their values to rebuild trust. Because leadership isn't just about performance, it's about how power impacts people. So let's own it. Today's episode was something that I found while I was reading something on the internet that really caught my attention. And as I read about it, I was not surprised at all. And I think this is why leadership, organizations, and companies are where they are. And this is particularly the work that I do. And this episode today is going to be very honest and, calling out systems for what they are, and especially under leadership, and especially under a particular leadership. And especially right now, I think all of this has been long in coming, but we're really seeing the actions of what happens when leadership and those who lead systems refuse to take accountability, responsibility, and especially reflection. And there's a version of leadership right now, especially in tech, that is very confident in not looking at itself. Leaders who openly say, you know what, they don't need introspection, that they don't need reflection, that they don't need to examine their impact. And somehow that's being framed as strengths. So I recently saw this, and this was probably about a week ago. And if you've seen this too, please put your thoughts in the comments. But recently, Mark Andreessen, who is a billionaire co-founder of one of the most powerful venture capitalist firms in the world, he went on a podcast and he told us on the podcast with the podcast that he practices zero introspection, and he does this as little as possible, and that he just moves forwards and go. And the host, who was asking him this question, just really called it, wow, that's a superpower to have zero introspection. And I want to pause right there and say this is the reason why our leadership, we see so much organizations who are struggling with so much with their employees. And the sad part is some people who listen to this applauded that. And I'm not here to just talk about one person here. I'm not just here to talk about Mark Andreessen and his comments here. I'm here because that mindset right there of what he said doesn't stay just on a podcast. It shows up in boardrooms, in team meetings, and in the way the decisions get made when no one is watching. And I've spent years watching what it does to people inside those systems. So let's call it out for what it actually is. That when you hear someone like Mark or a tech bro or a finance bro or some other kind of bro, yes, I'm saying a bro today. Or, when we just have a leader, not even a bro, but a leader saying, you know what, I am not available for feedback. I'm not available for correction. And I'm not available to change. You cannot build a healthy system on top of that. And we've been tolerating tech CEOs and other type of toxic masculine leadership for so long that we've normalized it so much. We've normalized the lack of introspection. We've normalized the lack of empathy. We've normalized the dismissal of anything that requires actually looking at yourself. Self. Why? Because that often got called as soft skills. And this is where this is where, the lack of introspection, the lack of empathy, and the soft skills, and what is considered soft skills, is broadly where it got us to where we are today. And so, I'm not going to be calling it out. Like, I'm going to be gentle. I'm not going to make it easier or more comfortable for people who are watching this episode to make them feel better. And, part of being trauma informed and the work that I do is calling out things that are very uncomfortable and calling on systems that have continued to harm and patterns that continue to harm. And being trauma informed is also refusing to sanitize the harm. And so, for anybody who's watching this, I want you all to understand that a leader who refuses to examine themselves isn't just making a personal choice, they are making a systematic choice, because leadership isn't just about what you decide, it's about the environment your decisions create. Not all leadership is the same. There's leadership that avoids itself and leadership that examines itself. So I did an episode about like 2 weeks ago about sovereign leadership, and that one was basically largely on matriarch leadership, and what that means is actually sovereign leadership. And what I call sovereign leadership doesn't avoid introspection; it depends on it. Because here's the truth: most leaders don't want to face power without self awareness. So, I want to say something here because I think this is where leadership is getting it deeply wrong. We have normalized the idea that self awareness is optional, something that you do on a retreat, in therapy, but something that belongs in how you lead, not just something that it belongs in how you lead. And in my work, before I did all this work, again, I talked about being a therapist in clinical settings, in organizations, and in the therapy room. And I saw so much of this, especially in the therapy room, where I saw so many people who were struggling with work, with leadership, and with their organizational systems. The most costly leadership failures I've ever witnessed were never about strategy. They were usually about a leader who never had been asked to look at themselves. And no one around them was safe enough to ask or to give feedback. And unfortunately, that is what we have normalized so much. And unfortunately, we're seeing all of this right now. It has a price. So, next, I want to talk about the human experience in all of this. And you don't need data to see the difference. You feel it. It's in the meetings where something doesn't feel right, but no one says anything. It's the decision that clearly affects people, but no one pauses long enough to consider the impact. It's when leadership says, we don't have time for this, which unfortunately really means we don't have time for you. And so, because I was so fortunate and privileged enough to sit with people during some of the most vulnerable and hardest times of their life, like some of the hardest and most painful times of their lives, I noticed a pattern. And that's why I created the Human Systems Integrity framework, which is HSI. And In every organization that operates, I noticed that there are two levels. And the two levels stated, every organization that we usually work with, the stated system, like, oh, we have the values, these are our values, this is our mission, these are our philosophies, they use language, integrity, very people first, and that we care as an organization. And then there's the live system, what actually happens under pressure, what gets tolerated, what gets rewarded, what gets ignored. Human systems integrity examines the gap between those two realities. So when that gap is wide, the system doesn't just underperform, it starts producing harm very consistently. And so, with all of this, it usually leads to moral distress and the feelings of moral distress. And so this harm usually shows up in the people, especially the frontline workers and the middle people. So I like to call this the micro and the meso levels of an organization. It's staying in the meeting and nodding when something inside you is saying, this isn't right. It's doing the work while slowly feeling less connected. It's telling yourself, this is just how it is here. It's always been like this. This is just how, this company rolls, or, this is what they do. Even when you know that it shouldn't be. And this is a part that we don't talk about enough. We keep asking people to be resilient. All these companies, all these organizations have like resilient training or some other training to really put it back on the individual, the person who is feeling all of this, and say, hey, you the person, you learn to manage your stress, you learn to manage your resilience, you learn to develop and change your mindset, you learn to take care of yourselves in this stressful environment. And I believe in all those things too. Don't get me wrong. I feel like mindset, resilient, all of that is important. But here's what I also want you to know. When you put those tools in a broken system, they don't fix anything. They just help people tolerate the thing that is breaking them. And that is not well-being. That is damaged management dressed up as leadership development. Yes, I said that. And the people inside those systems know the difference. They feel the difference. They just don't always have the language for it yet. And here's what I want you all to understand who is watching this. A leader who refuses to examine themselves isn't just making a personal choice. They are making a systematic choice, because leadership isn't just about what you decide. It's about the environment your decisions create. And not all leadership is the same. There's leadership that avoids itself and leadership that examines itself. And again, that is what I call sovereign leadership, because sovereign leadership does not avoid introspection. So, in doing this work, I wanted to, as I did this work, I should say that I saw a lot of parallels between organizations and family systems. And so I noticed that there were so many similarities between corporate organizations and family systems. So step outside of work for a second here as I explain the family systems. And the thing is, we would never look at a child in a family system struggling with an emotionally unavailable parent and say to this child, you need to adapt and adapt better. We will look at that parent and in organizations, that's exactly what we do. We look at the employee, we send them to training, like, again, the resilience, the coaching, the executive coaching. We coach them on resilience. We give them all these apps to sign up for, like Calm. And through all of this, the system stays exactly the same. One of the things, as I talk about being trauma informed and especially trauma informed leadership consultant, is all of these experiences, whether it's at work, at home, at school, regardless of what, the body, specifically your body doesn't understand that, okay, this is a different setting. I'm at school, I'm at work, or this is my boss, or this is a parent. The thing is, all of this doesn't just stay in your head. And the body in your body keeps the score. The tension that won't release, or the exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. That constant feeling of being braced, like you're always bracing, even when you can't explain why. The body isn't asking whether it's just work, it's responding to an environment that doesn't feel safe. And it knows long before your mind is ready to admit it. And this isn't sustainable. Your body is telling you this is not sustainable. So I saw this a lot in EAP as an EAP therapist. People weren't coming in because they lacked skill or couldn't handle pressure. They were sitting across from me asking, how do I work? How do I work with someone or a system who won't hear feedback? How did I keep doing this without losing myself and my sanity? And I want to say, anybody who is going through this, I just want to say that this is not a personal failure. This is a system problem and a failure that is sitting in a person's body. And the unfortunate and the reality is everyone has a breaking point. Everyone has an eventual breaking point, and for a while, for a long time, a lot of people, they try, they adapt, they adjust, they go to all the trainings. Sometimes, unfortunately, they are put on PIP, performance improvement plans. They adjust, they find ways to keep going and keep going. But there's a limit. And when they reach it, it's quiet. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, and it's a moment where they realize, I have been carrying this for so long and for too long. And it's not because they failed the system. It's because the system failed them. And when they leave, when they finally had enough, they're like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. My body is no longer sustainable. My relationships are breaking. I'm not myself anymore. And they leave. Or if they choose to stay, they disappear from the inside. And unfortunately, both are a loss. I want to say that the research tells us, the research is out there, is telling us, therapy, sitting with clients, this is what the therapy room and the therapy clients told me. Here's what the body of every person who has ever worked under toxic, leadership already knows. You cannot pour from an empty system. And you cannot build a healthy culture from unexamined self. So, no, we're not going to keep calling this burnout like it's the weather. That, it just happened. And no, we're not going to keep sending people to mindfulness workshops and resilience training. I mean, yes, you can do so, but no, it's not going to change anything. While the very thing that is breaking them still sits untouched and unexamined at the top. Because I have worked with the people who have survived those systems. I have sat with them. I have heard what it has cost them, not just professionally, in their bodies, in their nervous systems, in their relationships, and who they became trying to survive a culture and a system that was never safe to begin with. That is not a soft skills problem. That is a trauma problem created by leadership that refuses to look at itself. Because the thing is, leadership without introspection is not just a leadership style, it's silence, it's a diagnosis, and we need to start treating like one. So, I know this episode may have felt a little personal in calling out systems and leadership systems, and yet if we don't start calling it out, start calling out for what it is, start examining this, nothing is ever going to change. No matter how much, again, how much leadership, how much executive coaching, how much resilience, how much mindset we do, if the system and its leaders won't introspect, then nothing will change. So I hope this episode was helpful for anyone who chooses to watch this. And again, this is your own pathway, leadership and mental well-being. As always, lead with alignment, lead with regulation, lead with accountability, and especially lead with integrity and own it. I'll see y'all next time. Take care. Bye.